Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Tian Lu will defend the academic thesis entitled Local Famous Trademarks in China Towards a Reasonable and Appropriate Governance. And I want to welcome everyone present here in this ceremony, both here in this aula, but also attending the ceremony online. Dear candidates, may I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis?
Yes, thank you. Highly esteemed Prorector, dear members of the Corona, supervisors, colleagues, friends, families, and the public audience in general, both here and online. Goedemiddag. Welcome and thank you for joining me today. As requested, I will use layman's term to walk you through my PhD research. This research is anchored on 3 starting points. Intellectual property rights are private rights. However, they do not operate in complete isolation. Governmental intervention plays a role in enforcing and protecting these rights. Meanwhile, IPRs are also policy instruments. For instance, patents and copyrights are designed to promote innovation and creativity, while trademarks and geographic indications could create and maintain specific market orders. When reviewing these 3 points together, it is logical to foresee a big X. It represents the diverse force of governmental intervention, varying by IP category, policy goals, legal traditions, and affected by many other factors. This big X also underscores the dual nature of governmental intervention. They can be either beneficial or detrimental to society. Consequently, a critical question emerges: which interventions are justifiable and which are excessive, and where the lines should be drawn? The founding of this boundary is at the heart of my PhD research, which examines China's local famous trademark system as an example of extensive state intervention, offering a concrete context for exploring these intricate line-drawing discussions. My thesis answers 3 core questions. The first being, what is a local famous trademark? Since it is a unique phenomenon in China and there is very limited English literature addressing it, it is essential to pave a factual basis first. So chapter 2 of my thesis looks into the local famous trademark from the aspects listed on the left side in this slide. The term local famous trademark is not mentioned in any national legislation in China. Reference to it appears only at the subnational levels. Therefore, from a methodological standing point and with a view of the legislative quality, the level of legislative bodies, and the feasibility of obtaining a representative size of samples, this research identifies the laws pertaining to the local famous trademark from all the 31 provincial legislation in mainland China as the primary source of material. Based on this, the outline of the local famous trademark mechanism is like this. They were established in China by local legislation in the 1990s. Per the several objectives claimed, the local famous trademark is typically used as a tool to incentivize the local economy and to echo the top-down national IP strategy led by the central government. Each year, the local administrations launch a campaign of selecting local famous trademarks from the applications submitted. The eligible trademarks must meet several preset criteria, mostly economic ones, such as turnover and market share. The applicants must be local as well, meaning their business must be registered in the local administration and they must have paid tax locally. Once being rendered the local famous trademark honorable title, the trademark will receive a much broader scope of protection than the ordinary ones, and the owner can put the wording local famous trademark on marketing materials and products and advertise it throughout the whole country. They may also receive monetary rewards from the government. The title has a validation term of 3 years, but the ex post administrative supervision is often absent. Further, in court cases, the local famous trademark acts as a silver bullet in the sense that it is submitted as established and governmental endorsed in evidence to prove a trademark's reputation, which received very little challenge. The year of 2017 marked a crisis of public trust for the local famous trademark system, stemming from an incident where the substandard cables were used in the construction of the subway in Xi'an city, the hometown of terracotta, which posed a serious risk of fire and potential fatalities. The construction company had been granted the local famous trademark title before the scandal was leaked. In response to the heated public discussion, the central government issued a red card to terminate the local famous trademark systems. However, the implementation of the red card was inconsistent across provinces, and the workaround solutions emerged shortly after. For instance, some local governments just rebranded the local famous trademark by using its synonyms, something like the local renowned trademarks. The ineffective red card solution underscored the need for a more nuanced approach to evaluate and regulate the local famous trademark system, one that moves beyond a binary or nothing perspective that requires firstly a deeper understanding of the question, what is a local famous trademark? I deconstructed the question into 2 dimensions in Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, respectively. Regarding the trademark dimension, trademarks serve as a badge of origin, distinguishing the goods or services of one business from those of another, thereby preventing consumers from confusion. This anti-confusion-based badge of origin function is the classic core and essential function of trademarks recognized across different jurisdictions. There is also a strong economic justification for that. Trademarks establish a channel of communication between a trademark and consumers. Via this channel, I'm using Coca-Cola as an example, massive information can be conveyed via a succinct trademark. Consumers could then rely on the information they have interacted with the trademarks, which could reduce search costs for their future purchases. This communication channel is personal, and the information content could be highly different from one person to another. Trademark can be broadly divided into 2 groups: ordinary trademarks limited by the principles of territoriality and specialty, and the extraordinary ones, which exceeded these limits. The second group of trademark includes conventionally recognized names, like the well-known trademark from the Paris Convention and the trademark with a reputation in the EU, to which the local famous trademark bears a resemblance in names. Given the resemblance in names, I conducted a comparison research in Chapter 4, exploring the answer to the question of, are local famous trademarks indeed a type of those conventionally recognized famous trademarks? The underlying logic is that if the local famous trademark regime shares substantive similarities to the conventional ones, then they can be justified by the rationale of protecting those commonly agreed conventional trademarks, conventionally famous trademarks. Chapter 4 concluded that the local famous trademark is different from the conventional famous trademarks in several key aspects. The conventional famous trademarks focus on protecting trademark proprietors' interests, particularly their investments, while the local famous trademark regime in China encompasses elements of investment protection as well. However, its primary role is to foster local economic development, execute the national trademark strategy, and measure the political achievements by quantifying the number of local famous trademarks. Therefore, investment protection in itself is not a primary objective of pursuit. A notable difference exists between the criteria and modality for identifying local famous trademarks and those for conventional famous trademarks, particularly regarding the reverse causality. To elaborate, for other conventional famous trademarks, to safeguard the interests of an established reputation, a flexible set of criteria is admitted for demonstrating and proving the set reputation. The underlying rationale is that if a trademark has a reputation, this reputation will manifest it in many avenues, all of which might be admissible as valid evidence to prove the reputation. On the contrary, the local famous trademarks approach narrows its focus to a set of predetermined specific criteria predominantly centered around local economic contributions. This reverse causality logic is problematic as it overly simplifies the intricate and dynamic nature of the reputation, reducing it to a narrowly defined measure of local economic performance. Further, I found that the economic-centric criteria have been particularly used for measuring local government officials' achievements under the centralized political system in China. Local governments have enduring enthusiasm for promoting local economic development, and the local famous trademark is one typically useful indicator in that regard. Given the significant differences, the conventional famous trademarks could not offer justification for local famous trademark in China. Therefore, for the feasible evaluations of the local famous trademark in China, and to answer the rest two main research questions, I returned to the basics of trademark protection. I placed the local famous trademark under an assessment framework with two benchmarks established and considers also China's social context, exploring the scope of the appropriate government interventions per which policy recommendations are provided. The benchmark I use are based on the minimum standards that the local famous trademark should meet, or in other words, the red lines that should not be crossed. As for the first benchmark, I paid special attention to whether the local famous trademark conforms with the rational basis of trademark protection and whether it reduces consumers' search cost. I found that the wording of local famous trademark as a misnomer disturbs the communication channel between trademarks and consumers with unnecessary, unreasonable, and incorrect information. When it comes to reduce consumers' search cost, the simple logic goes that to reduce the search cost, one must define what information consumers need first. However, as the proposition 5th of my thesis shows, the human mind is intricate and cannot be imprisoned, unified, or standardized. Similarly, consumers' perception of trademarks are elusive and ever-changing. And that the essence of a local famous trademark lies in the authorities' preemptive judgment that a trademark will perform well in the future. Such attempts by the government to predict or guarantee the future status of a trademark is both unnecessary and unreasonable as well. On the second trademark, this study asserts that a sound trademark system should not provide disproportionate protection to one party at the cost of others' interests, especially the consumers, who are often the silent group in the administrative policy-making procedures. It should be noted that this research acknowledges the legitimate role of local governments in fostering economic development and does not indiscriminately criticize the use of trademark as instruments to enhance local competitiveness. Instead, this research proposes that improving the local famous trademark mechanism involves identifying the points where the rightful responsibilities of local governments intersect with the two benchmarks of trademark protection. Ultimately, this research presented 6 policy recommendations. The number 6 policy recommendations is of particular significance. It lays out a fundamental framework that the central government level, at the central government level, and provides institutional assurance necessary for implementing the first 5 policy recommendations. The foundational question discussed in my research is not simply whether to retain or abolish the local famous trademark system per se. Instead, this study has explored the boundaries of authorities' power while pursuing goals like economic development under their interventions in market activities. Methodologically, this study provides a framework for testing the trademark-related governmental intervention. The testing framework pillars in the rational basis of trademark protection, combining the perspectives of interest balancing and calls for governmental authorities' active attention to the silent party, the consumers. In the policy-making procedure, the consumers are often forget in the policy-making procedure, and that is not only relevant in China, but is part of a broader discourse on the topic globally. That's all for now, and with that, I return the words.
Thank you so much for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Christopher Heath. Professor Heath is Professor of Intellectual Property, Foundations, Institutions and Education at our university. He is also the chair of the assessment committee, and he's also the secretary of the degree committee. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Esteemed candidate, you can be commended for having put a feature of Chinese IP law on the map that has hitherto escaped attention, namely, as you mentioned, in non-Chinese literature. And I wish your PhD had been available when I edited the book on IP in China a couple of years ago, because I think what you have brought to the attention of the outside world is a feature of IP law in China that does not easily fit into the internationally accepted trademark regime. And in fact, as you have written, this system of local champions of locally famous marks, as determined by local governments, partly distorts the functions of trademarks and, to a certain extent, misleads consumers. Now, my question would be this. In most fields of intellectual property law, the Chinese Supreme Court plays a major role in determining the interpretation of laws. It makes rulings, it gives guidance, and in this regard, I was a bit surprised that in your thesis you cite very little case law from courts, and let alone from the Supreme Court. Now, given the importance of the scheme of locally famous marks for business and the problematic nature of these marks in regard of the system in general, I personally would have expected a high number of court cases and litigation in this field, which does not emerge from your thesis, and I would like to know the reason for this. So in short, where are the courts?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent, for your wonderful question. I agree that it is a little bit bizarre that there's no actually case law that is pertaining to a local famous trademark. But when it comes to litigation, I would say if there's no party that actually brings that claim to the court, then there's no court ruling. That is first the point of my answer. The second would be, I personally would doubt what will be the motivation for a party to bring that question to the court. Which aspect regarding the local famous trademark can you really challenge? Are you challenging the evidence the local famous trademark owner when they applied for this mark, they submitted evidence, right? So are you questioning the authenticity of that evidence, or are you questioning the rational basis of having this local trademark mechanism at all? I do not think it is proportionate for a single party to challenge the rational basis of this mechanism at all in the court. So that may be one of the reasons that there's no big amount of cases in China happened. But there are indeed some cases, several really small numbers cases regarding one party challenging that the evidence submitted by the other party when applying for the local famous trademark was actually false. So that does happen. I hope that answered your questions.
Well, you said it's difficult to identify disadvantaged parties. Well, there may be competitors that have not been put on the list, for example, or there may be cases where this locally registered trademark is actively enforced in court against others. So in both cases, I would have expected some litigation.
I see. Do I need to answer that?
Well, if you would answer that, or I understand from you that there just is no litigation.
There's no litigation, not that much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Surblight Namavicene, who is teaching intellectual property law at the University of Vilnius, and who is also a member of the assessment committee. And I would like to welcome her very much to Maastricht University today. Very good to have you. You are joining us online. Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, dear esteemed candidate. Thank you very much for your PhD thesis, which I actually indeed read with great interest. And I have a question. According to the analysis which you provide in your PhD thesis, local famous trademark protection is in essence very much about the protection of investment, which you said also in the presentation, for the investment for developing or promoting local economies, meaning good performance in tax payments, net profits, annual sales, even a market share, etc. So when granted such an intellectual property protection, the company does not only get a direct monetary reward, which you also describe in your PhD thesis, and which is rather unusual for classical intellectual property protection, but in fact, the company also gets a competitive advantage for a number of years. And this competitive advantage often may go even beyond the term of a local famous trademark protection as a trademark, because you also mentioned this once for all silver bullet. But this may yet not be necessarily because of the quality or the fame of a trademark, and you say it as well in your PhD thesis, but this may be owed to the good financial performance of a locally registered business. So my question is, how does such an IP-like protection of the basically local investment feature into the competitive landscape? And are there any checks and balances provided by other laws for tackling potential distortions of competition or unfair competitive advantage? And even going beyond that, I would like to know whether you see any alternative legal mechanisms for the economic requirements now under the local famous trademark protection being separated from this IP part protection of the locally famous trademark that could possibly better serve the incentive mechanisms as regards promoting the investment in local economies and would provide more balanced solutions. So just to make it short, would you see the separation possible, this IP type protection of a trademark And then all these economic requirements like good performance, tax payment, market share, annual sales, net profits, and so on. Maybe there are other legal tools that may serve as an alternative and would really let achieve a better solution, a more balanced solution when you have separated them. Do you see it as an alternative? Thank you.
Esteemed opponents, thank you for your question, but I'm sorry, but I do not really pick up what actually is your question. Are you asking for, is there any alternative governmental intervention that can endorse or identify a local enterprise economic performance, or is that your question?
My question is, now you have all these requirements can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You have the requirements for the locally famous trademark in China. Part of these requirements relate to the classical IP trademark protection, right? Whereas other requirements are rather unusual for a trademark protection, such as good economic performance, for example, these tax payments, as I mentioned, and as you mentioned in the PhD thesis, annual sales, net profits, and so on. So my feeling is that this whole system is a mix of IP protection plus economic requirements. And my question to you is, would you see a possibility or an alternative in separating them? And maybe that would be part of a solution to separate and make pure trademark protection on the one hand, and then take out all these economic requirements like tax payment and market share and so on, and maybe put them under other regulation like subsidies and so on, which would provide a more balanced solution and not to have everything in one mix. So that is my one question. And part of this question was also about the competitive advantage actually that the company which is granted such a locally famous trademark gets, because as you say yourself in the PhD thesis that this trademark, it promotes already a company which is actually very successful, right? And it gives then further competitive advantage, but not necessarily of its trademark, if I understand your thesis correctly, but also because of this good economic performance, which again serves the local economy. So this is, so to say, a promotion of something that already is successful. And in terms of the competitive landscape, my question is, do other companies have any legal tools, to protect somehow themselves of a possible unfair advantage, maybe? So I would like to know your opinion on this.
Esteemed opponents, thank you for your wonderful questions. To the second, I will start from the second question. I do not think there are other mechanisms for competitors to really challenge the local famous trademark title, because, as I said, there's no legal basis for that. There's no direct national law addressing that or regulating local famous trademark. So there's no legal basis for that. Secondly, the other competitors are free to apply for a local famous trademark title as well. So in that regard, I would not say that doors are shut for the other competitors. That is my answer to the second question. And the first question about a separation of the trademark aspect and economic aspect regarding the local famous trademark, that is actually one of the policy recommendations I provided in my thesis, that there might be some economic aspects regarding a company or a trademark that could be endorsed by the local government if it can benefit consumers. And with those kind of information, those information must be verifiable, must be clear, must be easily accessible to the public. So it's not just the economic indicators per se, it requires more dedication to do that. And you mentioned about, are there any other fields of law that may regulate this? I think maybe the unfair competition law can play a part to that. But here I would like to cite the first sentence of the well-known thesis, article written by Frank Schecht, saying there's no part of law that is more plastic than unfair competition. So in that regard, I did not take into unfair competition law into the consideration of my thesis. So I only focus on the trademark law, and I think in that field already we can, there can generate some policy recommendations to solve the local famous trademark problem already. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I would like to come back to this policy recommendation, which you mentioned. You speak still about the examination, so to say, of the authorities, that they have to analyze this verifiable information. But my question is rather on the regulatory level. Actually, would you see it as an alternative, to separate these requirements? Because if it is written into the law, so the authority has to apply the law as it is written. So they cannot just take out these requirements and not assess them. So that is my question. So do you see on the legislation level or regulatory level a possibility to separate these requirements from each other, IP and economic requirements? Because now they are all mixed up into one system, which probably, as far as I understand from your thesis, makes the whole problem, because they are two different things, actually, if you think about it objectively.
Thank you, esteemed opponent. There actually is one policy recommendation in my thesis saying there should be a national legislation addressing that problem to separate by separating the trademark-related governmental intervention from the economically related governmental interventions. By doing that, by separating the local government's responsibility or functions in that regard, there should be some provisions introduced in the national administrative law. I think I mentioned it in my thesis. That should be a not legislation per se, but administrative regulation from the central government level that defines clearly what the local government should do, should separate their functions in the functions of promoting local economy and others. Thank you.
Now the opposition will be continued by Professor Kong-Chun Liu, who is Lee Kon Tian Professor of Law at the Singapore Management University, and who is also a member of the Assessment Committee. And it gives me great pleasure that he is here with us today at our university. I welcome you very much to Maastricht today. Please.
So, dear candidate, I have one bigger question and one smaller question and one overall recommendation if I have time, but I will start with the first bigger question, which is actually related to the question that just raised. So you follow the approach of not the all or nothing approach, right? So you try to resurrect the current system, but that is very problematic. I think from the previous discussions that we can tell, because this is we are so unused to this kind of a mechanism, okay? So then to summarize my first question is that really you want to fix a problem by making it more complicated. So coming back to your last slide, which talked about the 5 rules that you suggested for the 6th policy, right? But then if you look at the first 2, they are there really to ban this local famous trademark as such, or anything related, or anything smell like it, right? But then the following 3 rules that you propose are actually bringing the death back to life again, of course conditional. You set rigorous conditions for continuing this regime by suggesting that while so long there is prior thorough examination, careful consideration and testing of sufficient justification, and so long there's a system of oversight which is then complemented by corresponding legal framework for accountability. But this is even more complex than the existence one. And then people will naturally ask the questions. Which government is going to do all this regulatory work? Is it the local government? No, because they are the cause or the source of all this problem. It's not in their self-interest to really introduce this kind of rigorous oversight and evaluation and examination, right? But then if the local government is not the right candidates, then the only option you have would be then the central government, right? So the central government will have to do all this thorough examination, careful consideration, and testing and oversight over 31 provinces. I think that will be too much of a work that will bring it to its breaking point, right? So then I just wonder, but of course then you have to take a further distance away from the core issues of trademark. But then if you want to make your proposal really feasible, then you have to think about carefully then which governmental institutions is going to be entrusted with this complex the systems of thorough examination, careful considerations, and oversight. If you can answer that questions, then actually I will be very, very happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, highly esteemed opponent. I stand firmly with you on that point, and I agree that the administrative cost is really a valid concern. But the thing is that heavier administrative cost should not be the reason for not doing the right thing. Since we are now having the local famous trademark mechanism, it needs to be corrected. And a sound solution to limit that excessive administrative intervention, it requires more measures from the administrative government. That is just, it is. We cannot say, well, let's just abandon all of this local famous trademark mechanism because it's too complicated, and the solutions surrounding that is too much of work. I personally would say, in my humble opinion, that should not be a big no-no of not doing that. And secondly, you mentioned, could you please enlighten me a little bit on what is your question?
That's pretty much my question. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You are satisfied with the answer? Yes. Okay. In that case, the opposition will be continued by Professor Tiaki, who teaches intellectual property law at our university and who is also a member of the assessment committee.
My dear candidate, first of all, my congratulations for that very nicely and articulately excuse me, written thesis and a nice presentation. It's a very delightful and promising read. So I start with what you write. On page 200 of your thesis, the written submission, this version that I have, you suggest that the EU IPO deems the requirement of registration to serve as the boundary between Article 8.5 and Article 8.2c of the EU TMR, that is to avoid a conspicuous legal gap regarding the non-registered trademarks with reputation and to be in line with the spirit and ratio ledgers of the Paris Convention and EU TMR, although neither Article 8.2c ETMR nor Article 6 bis of the Paris Convention expressly require a well-known mark to be a non-registered mark. Now, my dear candidate, this is a nice and interesting observation that you bring out. Why? Because Article 8.5 of the EU TMR protects only registered trademarks without Article 8.2c of the EU TMR, EU trademark regulation that you refer to. Reputed non-registered trademarks would have gone unprotected apart from the limited protection that we have under Article 8.4 of the regulation. And in order to close this legal gap, the trademark regulation under Article 8.2c offers protection to well-known marks as understood within the meaning of Article 6 bis of the Paris Convention. Now, in light of all this and what you write, and especially your discussion on well-known marks, which starts at page 209 of the written version of the thesis, my dear candidate, I have two questions. Firstly, on the checks and balances that are available within the current, you start discussing with the SAIC 1996 to the more current version, and more notably within the proposed 2020 SPC, the Chinese Framework for Trademark Protection, and whether that you think that that is enough to protect well-known trademarks in China. Or is this a case, as you humorously put on page 233 of your thesis, to borrow an expression from you, you're gulping the dates without chewing them, which means implementing without an accurate understanding of the well-known marks? That's my first question.
Sorry, esteemed opponents, I'm sorry, I have to ask, could you please repeat just the last two sentences of your question? I did not really pick it up.
Indeed. So my first sub-question is, on the checks and balances, or the framework, simply put, that is available within the current framework on well-known marks in China, with a special focus on the 2020 SPC framework, which you briefly referred to, and whether you think that is enough to protect well-known marks in China. That's my first sub-question. So the current framework that we have on well-known trademarks in China, and whether you think it is robust and it is sufficient to protect well-known marks in China.
Thank you very much, esteemed opponent. When it comes to the protection of well-known trademark in China, so not the local famous trademark, but the well-known trademark in China, I would take a historical review on that part. I think the well-known trademark protection in China is getting better. It used to had the history of alienation as well, just as what happened to the local famous trademark. It was firstly used as a governmental endorsement mechanism as well in China in 1996. At that time, the protection of well-known trademark in China was something similar to the protection of the current local famous trademark. It will be a proactive, administratively proactive identification of well-known trademarks, and that is what we call the alienation of well-known trademark. And then gradually, after decades of legislative changes, finally in 2013, the third amendment of the Chinese trademark law, we stopped the proactive identification of the well-known trademarks in China into the passive and case-by-case basis protection. In that regard, I would say I see quite a progress in that regard. I am not sure if that is the well-known trademark protection now provided in China is sufficient. I need to look into that topic in order to answer that. But well-known trademark is not the main subject matter of my research, so I did not go into that deep. But the mentioning of the well-known trademark in my thesis, I think it is necessary. It reached to the degree of being necessary, but not being exhaustive. That is my answer.
So can I say then, as you put on page 233 of your thesis, because between page 209 to 233 of the thesis, you discuss the concept of well-known marks, And as I follow, and you very nicely and humorously put a Chinese expression which says that the concept of well-known marks in China is the equivalent of, as they say in Chinese, gulping the dates without chewing them, which means implementing the concept of well-known marks without accurately understanding them.
Yes, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an expression from your book. And if so, if I can have a follow-on question, because you also refer to the framework in the EU on the concept of trademarks, you refer to Articles 8.5, 8.2c, and their parallels with the Paris Convention, the paragraph I just referred to at the start of my question. My question to you, my dear candidate, then would be, what inspirations, if any, do you draw from the EU trademark framework to make the Chinese framework more comprehensive, robust, and in compliance with the international approach?
Thank you very much, esteemed opponent, for your wonderful question. It is a often observation or a way of framing questions like what one territory, one country could learn from the other ones regarding specific legal questions. But I am a strong believer of the principle of territoriality, and I believe that the legislation in a country is could be a reflection of the social context, and it could be a response to societal questions or problems. In that regard, I would be very cautious to go into the track that saying what one legal system could learn from the other one. But when it comes to the protection of well-known trademark or the trademark with a reputation, I do think the EU approach is better because it's the administrative bodies stay away from proactively identifying which trademarks is good or which trademark should be rewarded a specific honorable title, and the trademark with a reputation protection in the EU is only triggered when there is a risk of infringement or there is a third party posing that question. And in that regard, I think it's really good that the EU. There's actually, I don't think there is administrative intervention in the EU regarding trademark with a reputation in general. So in that regard, I think the Chinese governmental intervention into the trademarks identification should be stopped. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. It does.
Now I'm very happy to allow Professor Suurblijd Namavichine to raise a second question.
Candidate, my second question is a little bit in a broader context. It goes a bit beyond your PhD thesis, but still I'd like to know your opinion on that. To my limited knowledge of the Chinese law, in April 2023, China has strengthened its anti-espionage law by broadening the types of information that may constitute a state secret. As a result, foreign companies that do business in China or with Chinese companies face a risk of often rather simple information flowing to them from the Chinese counterparts being considered as a state secret with the consequences that may follow. And needless to say that such rather strict data security laws may have a negative impact on foreign investment. So now, in your opinion, this law, which as far as I understand is on the national level, may affect the locally famous trademark system, given that part of the legal requirements for the locally famous trademarks are related to the economic performance of locally registered business, as we spoke also before. And this possibly does not preclude the fact that such locally registered business may be supported by foreign investment, for example, in the form of a joint venture.
Professor, can I just...
Yes.
Not sure, perhaps it's better not to use your hands too much and be a bit closer to the microphone, if possible, to the computer. Yes. Can we try?
Sorry. Shall I repeat my question?
Yeah, not necessarily from the start, but if you could briefly summarize, that would be very good.
Summarize it. So in April 2023, China strengthened its data security laws, basically, by broadening the types of information that may constitute a state secret. So now foreign businesses that do business in China or cooperate with the Chinese counterparts, they face a risk that information that flows from the Chinese partners, and sometimes even very simple information as far as I read, for example, email signature, may be put under the type of it being considered as a state secret. So this, needless to say, this may deter foreign investment. So my question is, and as I said, this goes a little bit beyond the PhD thesis context, but still, since part of the economic requirements of the locally protected famous trademarks are these economic requirements, as we spoke, right? This good economic performance. So it's not precluded that this locally registered business may be supported by foreign investment, for example, as far as I understand, in a joint venture, for example. So what do you think? May this national legislation of rather strict data security laws, which partly deters foreign investment, may have some influence, some negative impact maybe on the whole local famous trademark system? Again, because part of the requirements for the protection are economic requirements.
Esteemed opponents, thank you very much for your question. That is really an interesting point. I have to say that I did not include that data protection law into my thesis. But as to your question, I would say the economic criteria used to identify the local famous trademarks, they are quite not really confidential information. And it concerns the market share or the tax paid amount, and so those are not highly secret information, I would say. But on the other hand, I do also recognize that there's not enough transparency when it comes to the criteria that the local government used to identify the local famous trademark, because those information, the source of those information is not provided in the public announcement of the list of what local famous trademark are identified in a certain administrative region. So that is also one of my concerns written in my thesis, that the information, the transparency level of the information should be increased. And from a consumer's perspective, the consumers should be equipped with the easy access to the criteria that the governments are using to identifying the local famous trademark. Otherwise, everything will be just one party saying statements without the support of the factual basis. I hope that answers your question.
Well, partly maybe. Well, actually, this what I would like to hear is this kind of contradiction between now the local system and the national law, because the locally famous trademark system strives to develop the provincial economies, the local economies, right? And put all these incentive mechanisms into the legislation and so on. But on the national level, or on the other hand, if you wish, the foreign investment seems to be deterred, at least in part. So my question is, how to deal with these situations when you have on the national level one legislation that may deter foreign investment, and on the other hand, on the local level, you have the system that strives actually to promote this local economy. So how do you align these two systems? Do you see any solution for that? I mean, only your opinion, because I understand this is a complex question.
Thank you very much, esteemed opponents, for the wonderful question. I also I stand with you on the observation that there is separation in terms of the local legislation with the national ones, and the local famous trademark is actually a typical example in that regard. So in my policy recommendations, one of the major one is to introduce a rule at the national centralized legislation level that would serve as a good start to hinge the local legislation and the local practice with the nationally regulated approach. So that would be a start. And I do realize and I do identify that there is a big separation in terms of legislation and regulating specific issues from the central government with the local ones.
Thank you so much. Then I am very happy to be able to allow Professor Kung-Soon Liu to raise a second question.
Yes, so I'd like to talk briefly about function, doctrine, and expansion. So you talked about this issue. I fully agree with you that this is happening. And as you also rightly pointed out, that we should not derive the normative choice of what should be protected as a trademark directly from what a trademark can do. However, you mentioned that in a U.S. case in 2017, the Supreme Court endorsed the expressive functions of a trademark in the Mattel versus Tam case. And there the court held that persons are entitled to use trademark to express themselves and opinions, which should be protected by the First Amendment. But this leads me to question then, what is then your understanding about the functions of a trademark? So is the function of a trademark to protect its owner against unauthorized use of the trademark? This is typically what I understand. Or is the other way that you seem to understand that the function of a trademark is to be used by third party as a defense for trademark infringement? So that is a bit confusing for me.
Highly esteemed opponents, thank you very much for your question. There is indeed expansion in terms of the court's recognition of trademarks functions, and I personally think that the discussions of trademarks function is actually it does not involve only one or two answers. It is actually a spectrum of choices that a specific territory or a court may take. And in my personal opinion, I would say the essential function of trademark, the origin indication function is the core, and as long as that function is well operated, others.
You may briefly conclude your reply.
And others functions of trademark will not be harmed in a significant way. For instance, an advertisement function and the investment protection function, I think they are only secondary functions. As long as the essential function of trademark is fulfilled, then yeah, that would be my answer. Thank you.
Tian Lu, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The decree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. I request that you and your company, both here and online, await the results of our deliberations and our return here in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. All your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Pressing the learning EU.
You didn't jump on their question.
But I, okay.
Yes. You showed readiness, and then I think that's
I was a little bit of push back. Oh my God.
Tian Lu. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Kamperman-Sanders is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom, and I now invite your supervisor to take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Tian Lu, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Dear Tian, dear Dr. Lu, our wholehearted congratulations with this academic achievement. Both Anselm Kamperman-Sanders and I are proud to see you stand here today. We were not always sure whether this day would come, but you proved your perseverance throughout the last decade or so. It all started in 2010, when you joined the almost brand new IPKM program for your master's studies. It is then when you fell in love with the Netherlands and Europe. As Anselm puts it, this was the start of your journey of not leaving Europe. I remember that I met you for the first time in 2014, shortly after I joined the law faculty as an assistant professor. You were one of my first PhD candidates to co-supervise together with Anselm. And since my own PhD time was not so long ago, I was very keen to start this trajectory. So were you. In 2015, we started having regular meetings and quickly discovered that your thesis, as you also presented it today, needed a critical look at the Chinese systems of local famous marks. Isn't this a hidden form of favorism for local champions in the disguise of a trademark system? This is when I saw an extremely relevant topic and thesis, which you carried out through until today. And I think all the questions and remarks that were made today really showed that it is a very relevant topic. But the journey was not a linear one. You worked at your own pace, sometimes leaving us without a sign of what you were doing for several months. We understood that you had also other priorities next to your PhD. as you put it in your own report to us after your first year as a PhD, and I quote, "After 1 year involved in a PhD life, a broader picture of the PhD journey has shown up gradually. I therefore have added several new items in my PhD to-do list, such as working on getting opportunities to do my research in different universities for short terms, being more visible in conferences, and building network more actively worldwide. PhD does not have to mean sitting in library, reading and writing only. It's a project with multiple dimensions." And I end the quote here. This is exactly what happened from there on. You visited several places for your research, like Singapore Management University. You also started working in other capacities, like becoming an intern for the legal blog The IP Cat in October 2016, of which you subsequently became, and still are, the Asia correspondent. In September 2019, you also started your own IP consultancy firm in The Hague, joining the IP community from a practical perspective, as you proudly announced to us. In the meantime, you also published several articles and visited conferences across the world. At times, Ansem and I were wondering whether the PhD still had a place. But in 2020, you suggested to apply for a research stay at the Max Planck Institute of Innovation and Competition in Munich and to finish your thesis. We were relieved that that worked out, and from that moment onwards, the final chapters were rolling out. With hindsight, I think the combination of Ansem's style of supervision, which you describe as prioritizing autonomy with guidance at crucial times, with my style of providing detailed comments on your writing, theory, and methodology, allowed your meandering to be kept within limits and finally made you come back to the writing seat and finish your work. Since October 2022, you have returned to the Max Planck Institute, but now as an executive editor of the well-known and famous IP journal Guru International. Inside sources describe you as a kind, funny, and hardworking person who is always willing to help and collaborate with peers to further develop herself as a professional. Don't stop doing that, Tian. Both Ansem and I hope that you consider Maastricht as one of your academic homes, which is worthwhile coming back to from time to time. Congratulations once more.
Dear Dr. Lu, also on behalf of Maastricht University and its Faculty of Law, many congratulations on the degree that you just acquired. I was very happy to hear that your first degree at this university was the master's degree of our famous IPKM master's program. Now you also have the highest degree that we have available at this university, and that is the doctor's degree. Congratulations. Also congratulations to your supervisors and to your paranims and to all your family and friends present both here in this room and also watching this ceremony online. It's time to celebrate. That's what we will do also at the reception. So everyone who is present here in the room is invited by the young doctor to attend the reception that takes place right here in this building. And except for everyone who is sitting on the first row, everyone is also already asked in a few minutes after the official closing of the ceremony to go to that reception. We will follow somewhat later because we will first do the traditional photo of the young doctor together with her paranims, together with the committee, together with the beadle. And also, therefore, together with the committee member who is joining us online, and we will make that photo for that reason also here in this room. Congratulations again, and with that I officially close this academic ceremony.